Greetings, Commanders, and welcome to another episode of the Captain's Log. My name is Beck. I'm one of the community managers here for Star Trek Fleet Command. And on this show, what we do is we take a sneak peek look behind the scenes at some of the people who work on Star Trek Fleet Command. And today, we have a special guest with us. We have Logan Starks. Hi, Logan. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Beck? Thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be here. We
got to start with the obvious first question. Who are you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Logan Starks. I am an associate product manager here at Scopely, and I'm a music, tech, and gaming enthusiast, I suppose. I grew up in a little small town of Champaign, Illinois, went to college there, and moved out to Los Angeles originally to work in the music industry. After a while of doing that, I was getting a little burnt out, and I kept falling back on my true love as a kid, which is video games. And coming out here, I realized the headquarters of Star Trek Fleet Command is right here in Los Angeles. So when I found that out, I figured it'd be a cool opportunity to be able to work on a game that I love in a franchise that I love, and here I am, and I've been loving it ever since.
What a story, going from the Midwest, being in the music industry, moving out to LA, and then getting wrapped up in the gaming industry. So you mentioned finding Star Trek Fleet Command headquarters out here. So does that make you a Star Trek fan?
Well, a little bit. I'm not used to not having to hit this thing to communicate with people. So you can tell, I'm dressed in the garb. I am a huge Star Trek fan. I have been my entire life. It was really Star Trek, The Next Generation was the only show that me and my dad really watched together growing up. And I remember the day I saw the episode with the Borg and just thinking they were the coolest enemies ever. And ever since that day, really, I've been hooked on Star Trek. I've seen pretty much every episode of every major series since, even all the new ones. I'm a Trekkie through and through.
Wow. Okay, then what's your favorite series if you've seen everything?
Favorite series has got to be The Next Generation. I've got a soft spot in my heart for Data, trying to become as human as he can with his little cat Spot. And I love all the computer characters, really, Data, Lore, and I think Next Generation really introduced a lot of those archetypes to me. And it will pretty much forever be my number one Star Trek, but Voyager and recently Deep Space Nine are definitely up there too.
Okay. Your position as Associate Product Manager, what does that mean?
Yes. Let me go a little more in depth. So I'm part of the live operations team, which means that I get to interact with the game pretty much daily. For players, that's going to be stuff like seeing events in game, seeing new offers, new claims of different gifts and such. And I really kind of get to design a lot of that stuff on the back end as well. So the fancy, lore-tied descriptions of the event where you're going out and getting Jem'Hadar hostiles with your Defiant, finding those little narrative pieces, that's going to be me as well. Really, I get to be involved in how players are getting to interact with a lot of the new content, and I get to kind of shape the way that players are interacting for an arc. Most recently, I did the Deep Space Nine Part 3 arc, and had a great time being able to release the Defiant and our DS9 villain crew, I suppose, with Weyoun, Pan, and Ikatika. Overall, I get to have a hand in a lot of the goals that players get to have on a day-to-day and month-to-month basis.
I love that. So you were talking about working on things. You did work on Deep Space Nine, Part 3, and people really enjoyed that. Do you want to talk about your thought process behind creating events and everything for that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Deep Space Nine Part 3 was the first arc that I got to run here at Scopely, and it's got a near and dear place in my heart. I really hit the jackpot being able to help release the Defiant for my first arc. It is a fan favorite ship. It is one of the most iconic ships that has ever been introduced to the Star Trek universe. And being able to be a part of the design process and hammering out, how players are going to interact with it, how players are going to be able to unlock and enjoy the ship throughout their gameplay, was super fun. And it was so rewarding to see everything coming to life there. And like you were saying, players seem to really love the ship, really love the officers that we released as well, and the month as a whole. I think as far as the events go, I'm a very player-focused, player-first player, I suppose. I enjoy when players are happy. I enjoy when players have a lot of fun things to do. So I really tried to design the month to just make sure players had a reason to stay involved, to go and try out all the new content, to really destroy as many Jem'Hadar as they can, and get involved in that new Dominion loop that we introduced to the game. And overall, I think we were really successful in rolling out things in a manner that players felt was rewarding and engaging and impactful all the way through.
Would you say that you had a favorite event during that?
Yes, definitely. We rolled out a couple of my coworkers actually collaborated with me on this idea. So shout out to them. But we had an event called the Many Weyoons, and it was, in the iconicity of Weyoun in Deep Space Nine, with all the different clones and them seeming more or less replaceable. Right up until the end there. We wanted to do something where players could kind of interact with that fantasy and, I guess, similarly to this, humanize our officer a little bit. And, it was great. We had Weyoun on Weyoun PvP combat. Which clone survived? I'll leave that up to you.
So speaking of the Many Weyoun's event, how did you go about not just that event, but all events past and now, I guess, future? How do you go about that creative process and mixing that in with the narrative element?
Yeah, so as a huge Trekkie, I definitely the main important piece to me as a player is the lore being correct, right? I love seeing bits and pieces of the series that I've grown up on and come to love every day of my life being integrated into the game that I'm playing every day, right? So for me, a lot of the research that I'll do when I'm trying to make events is going back and rewatching as many episodes as I can. Before my Deep Space Nine arc, I rewatched all of Deep Space Nine from start to finish. And I think players noticed, there's a couple of notable quotes in there, a whole bunch of thematic elements, and overall, a little bit of a mini narrative arc to kind of help guide players through the season and make them feel like they're really a part of Deep Space Nine. Our game only has a couple of different ways that you can score, interact with it, etc., right? I think Echo has referred to some of these as metrics before, right? You can destroy some swarms, let's say, or destroy some Borg, or you can go mining. And I think, for me, the creativity really comes in trying to find a way to make a couple of these metrics work in our favor in a way that feels real, right? You've got your Defiant, you've just built it, it's sitting at your dock, and the first thing that you really want to do with it is take it out to go fight some Jem'Hadar. So undoubtedly, I'm going to have some events revolving around taking out your Defiant to take over the Jem'Hadar there. And even at the beginning of my arc, I tried to have a little homage to the season 3 intro to the Defiant. So, players got to get captured by the Jem'Hadar and find out that this treaty that they were signing, where they're handing over Deep Space Nine back to Cardassia, it was all a farce, right? You find out that the Jem'Hadar had duped you, and you get to play through this for the first couple of days of the arc, which, at least for me, gets to feel like I'm a part of that story and I'm a character on those crews getting captured. For me, that's the ultimate goal.
Wow. That is honestly super impressive, hearing your creative process through the entire thing. I had no idea that you actually went back and rewatched. That's so fun. So then with events in the future, are you going to be working on more in the future? Another arc, perhaps?
Definitely more events, definitely another arc. And Deep Space Nine Part 3 was really me getting my feet wet and getting a hang of the game, the mechanics, the process of event creation, and, really starting to understand everything that goes through in making a fantastic arc. So I do have another arc. I'm super excited for it. I think all of the things that we're going to be introducing to the game are absolutely incredible, and I think players are going to love them. And I think this time around with events, I have a greater basis and foundation of both how things function in the game, how the events function, and I'm looking to take the opportunity to go a little bit deeper, to be a little bit more creative, to try and see if how much I can push those narrative game boundaries and really can join them into something that is immersive for players.
So you kind of touched on a little bit of taking what you learned from your first month, your first arc, and what you would take into your next one. Are there like any other things that you would be like looking forward to doing, trying out, experimenting, maybe like with the overall story or even just with events or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, me personally, I'm always in Galaxy chat, right? both Discord and in games. So, I see a ton of feedback from players, and I want to do the best that I can to try and help bring, what players want to the game. So I've been with the company now almost a year, and I've just started to get my hands in a couple of more event buckets, so to speak. And I'm really excited to continue to refine and innovate on new events, new ways to score, new things that feel exciting, fresh, and rewarding to players. And hopefully in my next arc, I can make those things apparent.
I love that. Well, I know, like, for me, I haven't had a chance to know you for super long, but I always enjoy listening to you talk about upcoming content or having you explain things to me whenever you've gone through and designed an event. I know like Deep Space Nine Part 3 was honestly really fun for me because that was my first arc, really. So what would you say was the hardest part about working on your first arc, and what came as the most surprising for you?
Okay. Sounds like a two-part question, so I'll give you two answers. The hardest part was definitely the nuance that goes into event balancing. Our game is a massive game. It has a ton of content in it. And most of all, there's a very wide range of players, positions in the game. Even within the same level, players don't have the same research or the same power. So taking all of that nuance into account when designing events makes it at sometimes very difficult to toe the line between what is challenging to players and what still feels rewarding to have completed. And I think by the help of a ton of my coworkers, so shout out to my team there, I was able to do a pretty good job of finding that balance there for my first arc. But definitely something I'm looking forward to improving on and delivering better on in future arcs and future events. As far as the most surprising thing, just the amount of content, the sheer amount of stuff that comes out every month in our game. I mean, it feels like almost an entirely new way to play every month. And coming from, a background of like console or PC gaming, that seems a little more demure in its content release schedule, being here, it's very surprising and challenging to be able to work in all of the new content to this existing expansive game, and just make sure that, all of the players' fantasies are getting fulfilled in the right way, that the Defiant feels like the Defiant, that, the strong villain officers that I got to release were able to go out there and be villains in the way that they were intended to. Just trying to make sure that everything gets slotted in correct and overall feels good, I think was a big surprising moment for me, coming from a little more slow-paced background, I suppose.
Honestly, I think that this kind of leads into like the most important question that I have for you of the day. So no pressure. Do you think pineapple belongs on pizza?
Now that one's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I'm certainly more akin to, what temperature Janeway likes her coffee, or what temperature Picard likes his Earl Grey tea. But I'm going to go with no. I don't think it belongs on pizza, and I'm going to stand by that.
Well, Logan, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Captain's Log. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me as well. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, I only have one last thing to do. Engage.